One of the fascinating things that I discovered after I discovered your content, I started reading because honestly, at first I was like, okay, like part of me really, really agrees with everything Warren has to say, but the other part of me was like, how is it possible that like such a massive chunk of Christendom
Yeah.
could be so influenced by one person? Like that just it's almost like it's too wild
It
to
sounds
believe.
conspiratorial, is what it sounds like.
It does.
It sounds like I'm wearing tinfoil on my head. I'm a flat earther, and I think that there are lizard people that live in the center of the hollow earth riding dinosaurs. That's what it sounds like. But if you actually study church history, you go, "Ooh, this is actually all true." That's
Mhm.
alarming.
Yeah. So recently, I just took a course in the book of Romans, and because of that, my head was in Romans, and so I'm reading all of these commentators on Romans, and I come to this very famous passage of scripture,
Mhm.
which is in Romans chapter 5, verse 12, which says, "Therefore, just as sin came into the world through one man, and death through sin, and so death spread to all men because all sinned." So, verse 12, on the surface, if you've been discipled by Augustine, it almost sounds like original sin, right? Like verse 12 says, "Therefore, just as sin came into the world through one man, and death through sin, and so death spread to all men." And so I started digging into the commentaries, right? And then I realized, like, I'll just give our listeners a couple quotes to actually show you, like, Warren is actually right in what he's been talking about here. Now, when we go into scholars like Michael Gorman, who is a pretty well-known Roman Catholic scholar, he writes this in his commentary on Romans. He writes, "The centuries-long debate about original sin has been in part an interpretation of this verse, Romans 5:12. Unfortunately, the debate began when Augustine followed. Now, he says the Latin Vulgate's mistranslation of the Greek and read the phrase "because all sinned" instead of
In whom?
"inasmuch
Yeah.
as all
Yeah.
sinned."
Yeah.
In whom, who is Adam, all sinned. But Paul's point, now this is a Roman Catholic talking.
Yeah.
Paul's point is not really to blame Adam, and much less to suggest that original sin is passed on biologically. And the thing is, Douglas Moo, who is a pretty famous reform scholar, he was involved in the NIV. He says the exact same thing. He says we simply cannot come to this understanding of the text based on Augustine because well, by his own admission, if you've read any of Augustine's work, he just flat out admits he hates Greek. Like
Yeah.
he wasn't good at Greek. He was
Yeah.
much better at Latin, and then so he prefers to read in Latin, so which he did. And there was a problem with the Latin translation. It just translated that word incorrectly,
The
and that's
Roman
one of the
Catholics.
reasons why we come to this problem with this doctrine, because it was based on a mistranslation.
Yes. The Roman Catholic scholars know this. The problem is that the Roman Catholic Church will not concede this because it undermines papal infallibility, and I mean 1500 years, 1600 years of their tradition. They can't let it go. But the scholarship is really clear on it. As a layperson, this was the last vestige of original sin, Augustinianism, that I held on to was Romans 5 because I simply struggled, full transparency, I struggled to read it in a non-Augustinian manner. And
Mhm.
then one day I was like, why does my head hurt when I come to Romans 5:12? Like what's going on in Romans 5? And I realized, oh, I see sin, but I'm interpreting it as inherited sinful nature, sinfulness, guilt, total inability. And then I read the word death and I think of it as spiritually dead at conception. But I'm going to engage in an exercise. What if I let sin mean just sin, and then I let death mean death as in mortality? And all of a sudden, it was like, like things kind of, morphed. And I was like, oh, this makes a lot of sense. Um,
Mhm.
and then you start studying and you realize that there's also the Hebrew idiom of death, not meaning the grave, but also just a severance in relationship. And then you go, oh, well, sin in the Bible is regarded as virtually synonymous with death, and the Hebrew idiom of death means a severance in relationship. And so sin is a rejection of God. It's severing relationship with him and inviting mortality. And all of a sudden you go, oh, Romans 5 isn't teaching Augustinian anthropology. It's teaching that we reject God, we break fellowship with him. Oh, this actually makes things a lot clearer, a lot cleaner, and it resolves a lot of the tension. But like when you look at the early church fathers too, like you're talking about prior to Augustine,
Mhm.
commenting on a passage in Matthew 18 where Jesus was saying, suffer not the little children and let them come unto me, for such is the kingdom of heaven. In around AD 403, Epiphanius the Latin wrote this. Here, the Lord not only repressed the apostles' thoughts, but also checked the ambition of believers throughout the whole world, so that he might be great who wanted to be least. For with this purpose, Jesus used the example of the child, that what he has been through his nature, we ought through our holy living might become innocent like children, innocent of every sin. For a child does not know how to hold resentment or grow angry. He does not know how to repay evil for evil. He does not think base thoughts. He does not commit adultery or arson or murder. He is utterly ignorant of theft or brawling or of all the things that will draw him to sin. He does not know how to disparage, how to blaspheme, how to hurt, how to lie. He believes what he hears. What he is ordered, he does not analyze. He loves his parents with full affection. Therefore, what children are in their simplicity, let us become through a holy way of life, as children innocent of sin. And quite rightly, one who has become a child innocent of sin in this way is greater in the kingdom of heaven. And whoever receives such a person will receive Christ. And this is an early church father writing prior to Augustine. This was the Orthodox view. And it's still in Eastern Orthodoxy, it's still the anthropology that they hold there.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I think that's another interesting thing as well is like you had mentioned earlier, the the Christian empire was divided into East and West. The
Mhm.
Christian church was divided into East and West, and at least the Eastern Orthodox, the Greek speaking church, um, they did not hold to the views that Augustine held. And to this day, in fact, even to this day, there are there are very strict, like Roman Catholics, or pardon me, Roman Catholics, Eastern Orthodox, they actually deny doctrines like penal substitution
Oh,
that
big time.
has its connection back to Augustine and his strict views on original sin.
Yep.
And so this is pretty, like, and they use some pretty strong language when it comes to this. Like they just totally reject the fact, like, you are not born you're not born with guilt.
Yeah.
You become guilty as you sin over your lifetime. But you are not born damnable.
When you read Genesis 3 and you read all the myriad of consequences that fall from that, you have legless serpents being mentioned,
Mhm.
but no mention of all of Adam's progeny being created guilty in their mother's womb. Nowhere. When you get to Genesis 4, 6, and 7, let's see. Is that not loading? See if I can get it to load. Gateway timed out. I'll have to go off memory. It's okay. I've done it a few times. So
which verses are you looking for, Warren?
Genesis 4, 6, and 7. In Genesis 4,
go
6, and 7,
go through, and I'll bring it up. Yeah.
God sees that Cain is angry that he has had favor on Abel's offering and not his.
Mm-hmm.
And God approaches Cain. He says, "Why are you angry? Don't you know if you do well, you'll be accepted? But if you do not do well, sin lies at the door, and its desire is contrary to you," meaning it wants to rule over you. But you must master it. And so here we see, yeah, here we go. And Abel was, let's see, go down to the 6th. Okay, so the Lord said to Cain, "Why are you angry, and why is your face fallen? If you do well, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door. Its desire is for you, but you must rule over it." So this is in the understanding of Hebraic anthropology, where they believe in the Yetzer. There is good and godly appetites that he has created each of us with. So it wasn't a sin for Adam to find his wife sexually desirable. It wasn't a sin for him to consummate his marriage with his wife, contrary to the Augustinian view of all marriages since then. They think something changed, but it's not sinful to engage in the sacrament of marriage or the married wedding bed. But here you have this idea where everything that proceeds out of you is sinful, that you can't have any sort of good and godly appetite or drive that isn't sinful. But that's like saying that your desire for food necessitates you surrender to gluttony. Mm-hmm. It's like saying that your anger necessitates that you surrender unto the act of murder. And so we can have anger. We can be angry and sin not. We can be hungry and rule over that and not surrender to gluttony. We can have natural urges and hormonal motivations, and those are all good and godly. If we don't eat, we starve. If we don't reproduce, we die out. Those urges that we have, that we're taught as young men are inherently sinful, are the gift of God to help us reproduce and to seek out mates and to create marriages and families and become fathers and husbands and mothers and wives. These are good and godly things when used as God intended. But its desire is contrary to us. It wants to rule over us. And if we surrender to those marriage urges outside of marriage, then we give place to sin. If we surrender to hunger unto gluttony, we give place to sin. If we surrender to anger and we go over into murder, we've committed sin. But there can also be a healthy spirit of competition, of ambition, of desire. And there's good and godly versions of these things. And so what we see here with Cain is God is saying, like, look, if you do well, you'll be accepted. But if not, sin is at the door. Not meaning it's inside. Doesn't mean he's at your hearth or he's sitting at your kitchen table. He's crafty. He's sitting at the door waiting for you to give him an opening. Not that he was born ruling over you, but he wants to, and you must master it.
And I think that statement is kind of the nail in the coffin, because he actually tells Cain, like, sin is crouching at the door, and he tells Cain, you can master it.
Yes.
And according to the Augustinian view of original sin, you can't master it. And then if you go into the Calvinist view, not only can you not master it, but God may have predestined you not to master it.
Well, God predestined every temptation, every sin, every fall. Absolutely, in that view. Yeah, that's a very good point.